Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, Phil, it says at the top of my show notes, this is episode 60, season 11. So 60 shows this year and counting.
Yeah, and still going. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you imagine how many headlines we've actually covered?
Oof.
Imagine trying to do that calculation. That'd be something, wouldn't it? But let's see what we finish on for the year. But no, it's been a busy year so far, hasn't it?
Yeah, and even putting the headlines together for this week, there's a lot of stories kicking around, and a lot of big stories. There's nothing particularly what we used to call low-grade stories. There's a lot happening in the sector at the moment. So, we will try and capture as many of those bigger stories as we can this week.
Yeah, so we've got a big one. So again, as always, grab your cup of coffee, your cup of tea, whatever your Saturday morning beverage is, and sit tight. So we've got a good one this week, but we've also got the extract, haven't we, at the halfway break. So make sure you stay on for the halfway break. We've got the extract from a clip from last week from an interview we did with Nancy, didn't we? That was a great little interview there.
Yes, yeah, definitely. We'll share that after the halfway break. And also next week, we've got an exclusive pod interview with Rachel Clift, CEO of Ben, the automotive industry's hardworking charity. Philip and I interviewed Rachel during the week, and it was a fascinating insight into Ben because things are really, really changing there. They are transforming the organisation. There's a lot of changes since Rachel became CEO in November, and there's a new senior leadership team. So she really does outline what's changing there, what the current and future plans are. So that was a fascinating chat, wasn't it?
It was a very open and insightful chat, but we won't ruin it for you. It'll be as good as it'll be on your podcast feed from Wednesday morning. So do stay tuned for that, and we'll share a snippet on next Saturday's headlines. But do check your podcast feed on Wednesday morning.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
Companies already featured in our supplier specials include Ivendi, ETT, Generational, Tracker, MTC and Jigcar. So if you would like us to profile your business, then just get in touch with Philip or myself. And as we said at the top of the show, do check out our most recent supplier special, which dropped last week with Prospecting Dynamics founder and MD Nancy Rignall. With customer relation management, such a hot topic, it's picked up plenty of interest and plenty of online comments. We'll have an extract, as we say, in the second half of today's show, but do check out the full episode as Nancy pretty much presents a masterclass on how to maximize on CRM opportunities.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Well, as we said, plenty of headlines this week, and they come from AM, Motor Trade News and Car Dealer, starting with new car market dips 2% in August, but EVs hit record high of a 26.5% market share, reports the SMMT, while LCV registrations dropped 13% for the month. The used car market sees nearly new cars in high demand in August, finds Motors. M&S hackers claim responsibility for cyber attack, which grounded JLR's UK operations during the week. Then, after the midway break, we have the latest franchise and independent dealer news with Vertu's latest trading update, saying it's on track to meet profit expectations for the 2026 financial year. South Coast-based Richmond Motor Group expands with latest acquisition, and Trustpilot lifts its suspension on Big Motoring World's reviews.
So as Curtis said there, it has been the week for the new car and LCV registration. So the story has been covered in AM Online plus other trade publications after the SMMT announced the results on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. So as Curtis said there, the new car registrations fell by 2% year on year in August to 82,908. And that's accounting for less than 5% of annual deliveries ahead of September number plate change, according to the latest figures from the SMMT there. But clearly within this, I mean, there's a lot going on in the detail in terms of that, the sales channels with the registrations and the fuel type, especially on the back of the ECG or the electric car grant and what that's doing to the market.
Yeah, there's lots to unpick. I mean, August is traditionally a quieter month because it comes just before the plate change. But there are some interesting trends that you can pinpoint over the course of August. And you talked about the different segments. So fleet sales pretty much dominated the registrations for the month, accounting for just over 59% of all new vehicles. And that's despite a 4.6% decline in volumes. Private registrations rose marginally by just under 1%, 0.7%, while the business sector to those smaller fleets was actually up 41.6%. Although this only equated to fewer than 500 additional units. So it's a big percentage, but it's actually quite a small figure. And looking at fuel types, battery electric vehicle registrations actually increased by 15%. So that meant that the market share for the month was 26.5%. So that's the highest, not only in 2025, but that the highest ever recorded in terms of share of the total market. And this mirrors the pattern seen in August 2023 and 2024, when low registration volumes combined with a high concentration of fleet sales, which pushed up that battery electric vehicle share.
Yeah, and it is also interesting if you look at the plug-in hybrid market as well, because that resulted in a market share and a percentage change year on year of 69.4% for the month of August. Now, obviously, as you say, put this in context, it is a low volume month, so percentages are obviously higher, but that's a growth from just short of 5,800 this year to just over 9,800 in this August, and that would take the plug-in hybrids for the year to date to 134,000, and that's up from 100,000 last year. So it looks like that plug-in hybrid market is starting to show a bit of a shift. But I have a view on that because, you're going to talk about the manufacturers and how they've performed. But if you think about BYD and you think about Omoda and JQ, as we've had these conversations with our guests on the show, Curtis, a lot of their products are hybrid products. It is plug-in hybrid technology, and that they're the ones that are having a bit of growth in the market, and therefore maybe that's what is behind some of this shift in that hybrid and plug-in hybrid marketplace, in addition to consumers not making the full move to a full EV and just going into that hybrid technology first.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just looking at the battery electric vehicles, okay, it's the biggest market share. And a bit of context behind this. So the electric car grant was announced in mid-July, but we didn't actually start to see the first vehicles
No.
for a good 2 weeks after that. So very much, the early weeks of August, we started to see the first signs of which cars qualified at the lower band, the £1,500. So how much do you think the ECG contributed to that rise in market share in August? Do you think that was a factor?
I'm not so sure. I mean, the only thing you can say is, we know that once the ECG was announced, I think 16th of July, it did trigger competitive incentives, didn't it? Those
It did, yeah.
manufacturers that either knew their vehicles wouldn't be eligible for any of the tiers of the grants, or they were putting something in place until they had full clarity on whether their vehicle would be eligible for the grant. So it did trigger some very strong incentives from, deposit contributions, discount on list prices, subvented finance. So, you got to wonder how much of that actual triggered the activity. Because
Yeah,
when we interviewed Steve Young, it was, the comment was, and John O'Hanlon the same, was, it's new money. We'll take it, however,
yeah.
wherever it's coming from.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the real key to this will be September, when there's certainly more models available now. And as we reported last week on the pod, we're starting to see the first models appearing on the list for that higher tier, the tier one, the £3,750. But
It'll be
as you,
it'll be
yeah.
interesting to see when the grant finishes how much money the government have got left to put back into some pot somewhere else. But out of the 650 million.
You know what? I'd be grateful if they just put it into potholes.
Oh yes, yeah,
Yeah.
good one. Yes, yes.
You mentioned that I'd had a look at some of the brands, and okay, it's a small month, it's a small dip, but there's quite a few hefty losses for the month. So I've just sort of focused in on some of the brands that have seen their year-on-year figures down by over 20%. So starting with Audi, they're down 22%. Citroen down 38%. Its DS sister brand down 91%. And in August, there were just 7 DS models sold. So that does actually question the sort of long-term viability now for DS, certainly in the UK. Other losers included Fiat, down 70%. They sold 199 units. Honda were down 38%, Mazda down 42%. And there are more. So there's some interesting downward movements there for the month, and we'll really see if they bounce back next month in any of these brands. But also looking at some of those new brands that you mentioned, BYD. They were actually up 300%. So I think that answers your question about these alternative schemes to the electric car grant, because BYD were pretty quick out of the blocks
Yes.
with their own scheme. So, as I say, they were up 300% on 1,759 registrations for the month. So, good month there. Great Wall Motors, Aura, they were up 70%, but that's just on 17 units. More realistically, though, these emergent brands in terms of volume, JQ was we don't have their year-on-year figures, but because they haven't been around long enough, they haven't clocked up 12 months sales yet. But over the course of August, they sold 1,367 units, and that was purely on the JQ7, the SUV. So a good showing there. And its Omoda sister brand was 1,000 units. So you can see where some of the strength in the market is coming from these new brands.
No, exactly. And to your point there, you start looking at market share, which is the one that the manufacturers will be keeping a very close eye on. BYD in August alone, 2.12% market share there, taking their year to date up to 1.92 market share. So really, getting grounds in and taking over some of those, let's say, more traditional brands in terms of the market share that they have dominated over the decades there. So yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to see how this will start to pan out and what the year looks like. I think I've always said, we'll hit that 2 million registration mark. However, that is hit, whether it's through fleet, whether it's through retail, but more importantly, which brands are going to be taking that volume as we move forward there. And just before we get on to the LCVs, a little bit of sort of European market update. France for the month of August finished on 87,900, a 2.2% growth year on year. Germany, big month for Germany, 207,000 units, a 5% year on year growth. Italy, slightly down, small month, similar to us in terms of, one of the smaller months for Italy, 67,300, but a fall of 2.7%. Spain, strong month in percentage terms, but like I say, albeit low volume with 61,300, but a growth of 17.2%. And the US, 2.1% up with 1.5 million registrations in the month of August there, Curtis. So that puts a bit of volume on it, doesn't it?
It certainly does, yeah. We have got the van registrations for August, and they're actually from the SMMT press release, which actually just landed as we started recording this episode. And it shows that the market was down 13.3%. That's based on 14,365 registrations. And this contraction means volumes have now fallen every month this year. And similar to the car market, August is generally the smallest volume month ahead of the plate change. But this month's decline translates to 2,210 fewer registrations than this time last year.
Yeah, I'd say it's and the production. If you look at the production numbers, those are very, very poor reading for the UK production market for commercial vehicles there. But we'll head over to the next story and heading over to Motor Trade News, and this is a story from Motors that you were involved with, Curtis.
Yeah, so this is the monthly market view, and certainly the headline that the press release went out under was "Used market enjoys stable August with fastest sales achieved by nearly new cars," and it was a successful month for these nearly new cars, and this is something that's picked up in the Motor Trade News story because it shows that nearly new cars pretty much dominated the top 10 fastest sellers for the month, with vehicles like the Citroen Berlingo, Mini MPV, diesel, not petrol, not EV, but diesel. So it again reflecting that there is still demand for ICE vehicles, but that was selling in just 12 days for units that were under 6 months old with less than 5,000 miles on the clock. And other nearly new fast sellers included the VW Polo Petrol, which similar age band, under 6 months up to 5,000 miles, selling in 14 days. And the third fastest selling car was the MG S11 EV, which again, same age profile and selling in just 12 days.
Yeah, and we'll probably touch on that a little bit later with the update from Robert Forrester with Vertu Motors, who cites obviously stock availability. But in this report, they do obviously talk about units held by the sector, saying that car supermarkets and franchise dealers held marginal dips for the month. Car supermarkets on average 143 units, whilst franchise dealers at 57 units. while independents have remained fairly static on 39 units. So again, they're sort of looking at that stock availability, all kind of, not really increasing at this time of the year yet. So it'd be interesting to see what these figures look like in a post-September, and what that part exchange market looks like in the month of September.
Yeah, and that stability was also shown in data cell, which averaged 30 in August, and that was an increase of just 1 day on both June and July. So a lot of stability there in certainly the retail side of the used car market. And just finishing off on prices, the average price of a used car on Motors was £17,721, and that was up 1.2%, which is just £202 month on month, and up 2.3% year on year.
Yeah, and Lucy Tugby, who's the marketing director at Motors, sums it up very well, saying that August marked a further month of stability for used car market, with their data showing dealers achieving encouraging stock turns despite the impact of school holiday and good summer weather. And with the 75 plate change now underway, franchise dealers will be looking to build on their inventories with retailable part exchanges ahead of the final quarter.
So next story comes from Car Dealer, and the headline there is "Notorious Hackers Claim Responsibility for Cyber Attack, which has ground JLR to a halt." So this was a story that broke early in the week and has certainly been evolving pretty much on a daily basis. So we've chosen the Car Dealer coverage because it really does bring the story up to date, because it's reporting that a group of hackers who had previously targeted Marks and Spencer have claimed responsibility for the cyber attack, which has ground JLR to a halt. And this is affecting both its manufacturing and retail operations. And we'll talk about the retail operations in a minute. But Car Dealer reported that IT issues prevented the car maker from registering cars on the new plate day on 1st of September, and has been caused by an attack on the manufacturer's global systems. And the incident brought retail and production facilities to a standstill, according to the report. And the forces behind it now appear to have come forward. So we now know who's responsible, and it does look as though it's the same crowd of hackers that attacked M&S and other retailers earlier in the year.
Yeah, I think it's not good for the dealer network in the first week of September there, would it? But I think, did you see something in the FT that picked it up the day
Yes.
before? I think, yeah.
Yeah, the FT did a really good story early in the week, and because the cyber attack was disclosed on Monday, and the report in the FT says JLR declined to provide further details on the incident when it happened. But the FT did speak to a dealer, and it says one dealer said it had not been able to register new cars using the company's system. And the dealer added it was still selling new vehicles and taking customer deposits, but had been telling customers it did not expect operations to be fully normalized until Thursday or Friday over the course of the week. So it couldn't have come at a worse time for Jaguar Land Rover dealers, especially Land Rover dealers, because Jaguar's not selling new cars at the moment, but Land Rover is. And the attack, it was deliberate. It was around the 1st of September.
Yeah, it's not good. But we'll be back after this short break and an extract from our supply special with Prospecting Dynamics founder and MD, Nancy Rignall.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
Now, looking specifically at the work you do in call monitoring, or as you say, inquiry management analysis, When you take on a new client, what are some of the common issues you're able to identify specifically with inbound calls, and how do you get them to rectify them?
So yeah, I think, and again, with our big passion on customer experience, this whole piece has been something that we've loved getting involved with, and it's so massively changed since we first started doing it. So just to be clear, what it does, it looks at the whole process, so the whole customer journey, right from the very first touch point when the customer first makes contact via the telephone with the site. So whether they speak to a receptionist or whether they go straight through to sales or whoever picks the phone up, right through to what that actual relationship with the salesperson looks like on the phone, to do the end upon the inquiry management system, to does it become a sale, and what the whole customer experience is in there. Um, and it's we've gleaned through this an extraordinary amount of information because we've been doing this since the beginning of 2021, and because we had huge wadges of data going through for quite a long time, we've got almost 800,000 fully analyzed retail transactions that have given us really critical data in terms of where all the touch points are on a customer's journey with a dealership to buying a car, that actually lead to them saying yes, I'm going to buy and going ahead. So every single touch point we can see kind of what the significance of that has been in that customer's decision. And with that amount of data, the stats just don't lie. I mean, normally you find that the marketing companies, or even some of the stuff that comes back from the manufacturers who are doing this all the time, will say, we surveyed 2,000 people. We recently surveyed 2,000 customers. Well, hold my beer. Here we are with 800,000, and we've got some pretty specific information back from those. You asked me, Curtis, about what we can kind of identify.
Yeah, some of the common issues that even now when
Yeah,
you're monitoring a
absolutely.
call and the sort of things that you're hearing, and you're thinking, "Oh, really? Have they just said that?"
Yeah, no, crikey, absolutely. The thing is, I hasten to add, people that customers that we've got now who have been doing this for quite a while, or even customers who've come on it and are already seeing improvements. Um, the actual stats that I'm going to give you are probably going to be worse than this industry wide, because what we've got now is we've got customers who are regularly doing this and acting on the results, and so consequently are much better than the
Yeah.
norm. But
Yes.
if I look at the whole book and give you the stats on the whole book, which obviously gives from what happened in the beginning, it's going to give the averages and average out with what the very good performers are now. And I think you can pretty much say that the as I say, likelihood is that it's probably slightly worse than this industry wide, because there are people who just unfortunately don't do it. It can't be taken as a reflection of anybody who works with us now, because they're just not on these averages. It does look shocking, I'll just warn you. Firstly, the number of calls that just don't get answered at all, and that's 13%. So if you think how much money is ploughed into marketing and advertising and making sure that we are driving customers to pick up the telephone, and 13% of the calls just don't get answered
Yeah.
in the first place. The scary thing then is that we then see that 28% of the calls that are picked up, so more than 1 in 4, don't actually get through to a salesperson on first attempt. So whether they're held up with a receptionist or a host, or even, bless them, sometimes service picking up the bounce round call, um, you've got a customer not getting through to a salesperson. And even some of our current great customers struggle with this. And we have seen some sites where it's nearly 40%.
Wow.
So, more than a third of customers not speaking to a customer, speaking to a salesperson on first attempt. And there is no doubt that this is going to affect sales and closing rates. Absolutely will, because things have to happen so quickly nowadays for a customer. This is a huge issue. Then once the customer's enquiry's been answered and we're moving forward and handling the inquiry, the salesperson's dealing with the inquiry, then it's like, well, okay, so how many actually make it onto the DMS? So the old adage of what you don't know about, you can't manage. So if the sales managers who are all really busy and they've got 10 million things to do, and unless they're standing over their salespeople all the time, how can they possibly know every single customer and every single transaction that's happening? So,
well, that was just a snippet from that full chat with Nancy. We cut it off intentionally there, because obviously we'd just end up sharing the whole interview with you on just this short snippet. But it's on your podcast feed from earlier in the week. But it was a great chat with Nancy, wasn't it?
There's some scary stats that Nancy shared with us there, and that's purely on inbound, because we did go on to talk about outbound as well. And it's a fascinating chat, and you can hear in that extract how passionate Nancy is about all things related to CRM. So do check out the full supplier special, which is available now in your podcast feed.
Yeah, and as she says on that interview there, if you want to help get involved with your business, then just to reach out to Nancy, and she does prefer a phone call. She prefers a chat, so just be aware on that one. But we'll get back to the headlines, and we're heading straight over to Car Dealer. And this week there was an interim results or forecast from Vertu, our friend of the podcast, Robert Forrester. And the headline is that Vertu on track to meet profit expectations as Car Dealer welcomes the ECG, the electric car grant, saying that Vertu published trading update via the London Stock Exchange. The dealer reveals it's on track to make the pre-tax profit of 27.2 million in 2025, and that Robert Forrester backs the government attempts to stimulate EV market through the new grant there. So fairly optimistic results there from Robert's, keeping on track, but does cite a challenging new car market. And obviously, back to your point with the motor story, Curtis, it does highlight that good quality used car stock is not in high supply. It's about the volume isn't there, but he is managing to make the margin.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this trading update covers the period 6 months ending the 31st of August. And I think the full interims are expected to be published in early October. But it's worth them heading over to the Car Dealer Story, because they do have a link to the update. And it is very detailed, because you talk about used car volumes. So Vertu say used car volumes and margins have remained stable, and it has benefited from strong growth in high margin after sales. And I think after sales is the real sort of key to this particular story, because it's in terms of high margin after sales, it is generating a lot for the business, because there is a quote within this that says the board expects results for the full year to be in line with expectations, driven by a continued strong performance from our high margin after sales business and greater affordability in the new electric vehicle market, with more sub £20,000 new EVs available, and goes on to mention the likely impact of the electric car grant. And they seem to be taking a very positive view of the impact that will have, certainly from September onwards.
Yeah, and encouraging. We probably have to get Robert back on again at some point. But he also does, and there's been a few interviews with him flying around this morning, and he does cite within it that they have taken on some additional BYD sites in Hartlepool, Macclesfield, and Morpeth, and as well as a Skoda dealership. I didn't say that correctly, but please forgive me. In Nottingham, of course, I said Skoda. I would have written.
Shoulder, yes, yeah.
So, I mean, sounded like 007 or something, I think. I don't know what that was.
Well, you've got to channel your inner Sean Connery.
That's what it was, yeah.
Shoulder.
So I think, all in all, from Robert, I think a fairly optimistic outlook. He does, let's say, he cites a challenging consumer market, but obviously the ECG grant is stimulating activity. Clearly, profitability is the key focus rather than volume. He does also highlight that it's new car market could be a little bit of a battleground now with everything going on towards the end of the year. So one that we'll keep a close eye on and have a catch up with Robert at some point in the future.
And heading over to AM and staying with franchise dealer groups, the headline there is AM100 Group expands Hyundai portfolio with acquisition. I suppose that should be Hyundai, but let's stick with Hyundai, shall we? It's a great story, this, because this is Richmond Motor Group, who are based in my part of the world. They're down on the south coast. They've expanded with the acquisition of Everton Garage in Lymington in Hampshire, a Hyundai dealer. In fact, probably one of the longest serving Hyundai dealers, Everton Garage, family-owned business, and it's been representing the brand since 1987. But this means that Richmond increases its Hyundai portfolio. I think it has 5 sites at the moment with Hyundai, so this will bring it up to 6, as well as operating sites for MG, Skoda and Suzuki. So in terms of a tactical purchase, absolutely spot on, because it's in an adjoining territory. Richmond is based in Southampton, and this site is in Lymington in the New Forest. So, great move there. And it really does highlight the leadership of Michael Nobes. And before we started recording this, we were sort of recalling back in the day, Michael Nobes, who's the founder and MD of Richmond Motor Group, he was the scrappage king, wasn't he?
Yes.
Self-proclaimed scrappage king, because back in 2010, when the government scrappage deal was in place, Richmond did an incredible job in getting Part X's in on the scrappage scheme, and that really did help consolidate the sort of growth of its business. So good to see it still growing, still expanding, and a spot on purchase here.
Yeah, good acquisition that. And finally, a bit of an update on a story that we covered recently, and this is in Car Dealer. That Car Dealer, big motoring world, has Trustpilot suspension lifted after alleged breach of guidelines, saying that the suspension of the big motoring world Trustpilot reviews has now been lifted. Reviews site says that firm is now bringing review collection methods in line with guidelines, and that the car supermarket welcomes the decision and says it's committed to delivering outstanding customer service. So we did cover this story at the time it broke, and obviously they've spent their time now getting it uplifted because they were citing sort of a lack of clarity in the guidelines of the review process.
Yes, and it's quite clear that Big Motoring World and Trustpilot have actually discussed this, and there's the transparency in those conversations is now apparent. And within Trustpilot, there's a message that says, "We have identified that this business, which is now under new management, has previously invited people to review them in a way that didn't align with our guidelines for businesses. The business is bringing their review collection methods in line with our guidelines." So I think this is a sort of welcome resolution to this particular story, don't you think?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I think it was the right thing to do, and obviously they did liaise with Trustpilot to get this suspension lifted. So that's great news. So hopefully we've covered the majority of the headlines. The detail will be in the newsletter on Monday morning. If you've not subscribed to that, you can subscribe through the LinkedIn Motor Trade Radio podcast newsletter. Do check that out. That'll give you all the links to the headlines that we've covered. And finally, don't forget, Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Wednesday morning, it'll be published, the full interview there with Rachel Cliff, who is the new Ben Charity CEO. And as we said at the outset of today's podcast, fascinating and very open conversation there with Rachel, who's doing a great job in a very short period of time there at Ben. So there's a lot to get through on that one, and a lot to watch out to come from Ben in the future.
Well, that was a busy show, wasn't it, Phil?
It was just a bit.
But that really is all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.